Residents say it's a love-hate relationship when it comes to the sheriff. On immigration laws, most people support the sheriff. Others say he racially profiles.
I think he's unfair with it because he's putting innocent people in the crossfires too.
I don't buy into the racial profiling thing. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it's got to be a duck.
When it comes to harassing his political enemies,
that's his power, and like we've seen before, he does come up with other ways to come at people who say something that is not beneficial towards him.
If it's illegal, why isn't he being stopped from doing it?
And is he really above the law?
I don't think he's above the law. He's doing the best job he can. I'm for the guy.
Yes, I think he's above the law. He thinks he can't be touched.
In Phoenix, Andy Harvey, 12 News.
Still ahead tonight, we tackle two more topics. Political enemies of Sheriff Joe Arpaio frequently become subjects of MCSO investigations. Are they being intentionally targeted? Plus, illegal immigration. Sheriff Arpaio is currently under a federal investigation for claims of racial profiling. He's been stripped of the federal 287G immigration enforcement power, but says state law allows him to continue his controversial immigration sweeps. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Tonight we're questioning whether Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio is above the law. The sheriff has opened investigations into several county officials who have turned into his political enemies.
Just today, the Arizona Republic reports the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office is asking for personnel records and hiring records of 7 county employees, including the internal auditor. Earlier this month, that auditor determined the sheriff's office had violated procurement procedures when buying a $465,000 bus to transport inmates. MCSO has also reportedly asked for records of 6 other officials, including County Manager David Smith.
Rick DeBrule joins us now with more on the legal battles between Sheriff Arpaio and county officials. Rick?
Well, Mark, you know, it was just 3 weeks ago that we had Sheriff Arpaio on as a special guest on Sunday Square. In fact, he was the only guest that day. And while he has had some very public battles with county officials and the mayor of Phoenix, he argues that he does get along well with others. Although Supervisor Don Stapley's attorney, Paul Charlton, disagreed after his client was arrested for a second time.
It's vindictiveness. It's nothing more than that. It's a political ploy. It's just as I said in there, it's the kind of thing you might expect from a third world dictatorship, not from our criminal justice system. It's an abuse of the system. That doesn't happen here in the United States, and it's wrong to proceed in that fashion.
But on Sunday Square Off, Sheriff Arpaio said it is neither political nor vindictive.
First of all, they don't like the sheriff enforcing the corruption laws, number one. They don't like me enforcing the illegal immigration laws. But you know what? I could care less what they like. I serve the 4 million people in this county. I work for them. I don't work for any governor or politician, so they can go after me all they want. I'm very comfortable, been around 48 years, 25 years with the U.S. Justice Department, Drug Enforcement Administration as a high official. So I think I know how the feds operate, and I've been the sheriff for 17 years, and they're not going to deter me, a few politicians, from doing the job.
And in fact, Sheriff Arpaio makes the argument that having been sheriff for 17 years, it's really only been these political battles that have cropped up in the last few years. By the way, you can see that entire Sunday Square Off with the sheriff at 12news.azcentral.com. In the Information Center, Rick DeBrule, 12 News.
And back here with our representatives from the sheriff's office and our political observers, you know, we just heard a former U.S. attorney, Paul Charlton, say the sheriff is vindictive. He runs his office like a dictatorship. Isn't there a pattern of the sheriff announcing investigations against political opponents and nothing resulting in the end?
I like Paul Charlton. I think he's a really nice fellow and a good attorney. I think his memory, though, has slipped a few gears because it's not only 4 years ago, while he was still the U.S. attorney, that Paul Charlton asked the sheriff and the sheriff's office to assist him in public corruption cases and to bring them to his office to prosecute. Now that Paul has changed hats and now he's on the criminal defense side, obviously he's changed opinions, too. So I think that the rhetoric you hear now is because of who is writing his checks.
Okay, take Paul out of the equation. You got the Attorney General, the Phoenix Mayor, Board of Supervisors. The sheriff talks about, I'm investigating them, but I'm not going to say why. I mean, isn't there intimidation here, Dennis?
Well, it's certainly, you know, in the case of like a Stapley or a Sandra Dowling, I mean, he gets big headlines out of this stuff. But with the case of Sandra Dowling, it's like 20-some felony counts or something like that. With Don Stapley's 118 criminal counts against him. And at the end of the day, I mean, how many of those things stuck? I don't think anything of that stuff.
I think using Dowling as an example is a bad idea because the Sandra Dowling case was in fact prompted by the Board of Supervisors who initiated the case, referred it to the Sheriff's Office for investigation. They were the impetus, they were the the people pushing that case for the investigation and prosecution of Sandra Dowling. So I think that's a pretty bad example.
But what about Stapley, though? I mean, 118 counts they went after him, and what did the sheriff's office get at the end of the day with that?
And how many hours are spent on these investigations? How much taxpayer dollars?
If I could interject a little bit here, there's always going to be friction whenever you have the people directly electing law enforcement personnel, and of course in some counties it's the judiciary, it's the board of supervisors. And when a law enforcement personnel, he's elected, he has a constituency, he has to do what they want to do. Some people may want to ignore some laws. He wants to enforce them all as his constituents want to. And then some of the people that are alleged to be participating in public corruption, they're also political actors. So there's always going to be this friction. It's not a perfect system, but it's the best system that man's ever devised.
But it's much more than just systemic. I mean, I can't think of any county in the country where you have the sheriff,
County, Illinois,
where you have
Kings County,
where you
New
have the
York.
sheriff investigating all these public officials.
And outright calling out not just one sitting judge, but he's gone up against other judges in the past too.
And unmarked cars sitting in front of, outside of people's homes, like Attorney General Terry Goddard's house. There was a squad car outside his house, and there was no explanation.
And you have the head presiding judge, Barbara Mandel, saying that she had cars coming by her house. I mean, these are people with a lot of credibility in the community.
Yeah, we explained both of those instances, and that's because there was, in fact, an operation within 5 blocks of Mundel's house, and these guys were just back up sitting there. They didn't even know Mundell lived there. Mundell's records aren't even part of the public record. How would we know that?
And that was explained.
Yeah. Now, that was explained, Joe. That's kind of a low shot.
The statement we got from the sheriff's office that there weren't deputy cars near Mundell's house. You're saying there was an operation near the house?
There was an operation a few blocks away.
And so you're saying what Mundell is accusing is a low shot?
I was accusing you of it just now.
Because the judge is saying, look, they were in front of my house. And she's saying that concerns me gravely.
Well, then ask her about that. If she's concerned about that, if she's worried about intimidation. The fact is there was an operation within 5 blocks of her house. There was a perimeter set up. When the call was made in by the Attorney General by her saying, oh, I'm concerned about that, they have a call an operation off. Okay, so that's all been explained on the record. And I have to say this, and I don't want to burn up too much time, but the whole premise of this program is, does the sheriff think he's above the law? That's a loaded question. And everybody, we want an objective press, but we get a free press, and that's fine. And this is all part of the balance of power. The press is an essential component of that. But let's be fair about this. The loaded question, does the sheriff think he's above the law? Anybody who's enforcing the law that other people want laws ignored is going to look like he's above the law to that small elite few that wants some laws ignored.
All right. Well, you got county leaders and community leaders using terms like dictatorship. It's hard to ignore those kinds of arguments. And we'll get back to this again. We'll talk a little more about immigration and allegations of racial profiling coming up.